Welcome to the Relationships Inside Out podcast with Doctors Gregory Seibert and Kimberly Murray, licensed marriage and family therapists. Join them on this journey as they explore the ins and outs of relationships. Welcome to Relationships Inside Out. Today we're going to be talking about reciprocity in relationships.
Or essentially the give and take.
Yep. So when you think about this, Greg, because I know you work with a lot of couples, what comes to mind when you talk about reciprocity?
So in the couple context, this could exist within parent-child, friendships. But when I work with couples, it's a partner often feeling like they're carrying the load. Now that load is subjective. So it could be the duties of the house. It could be the load in the bedroom in terms of like intimacy and things like that. So it's really about the effort that's perceived in relationships and if it's perceived to be equal or not. And what does that mean?
That word is so important, perceived, right? What I might perceive as equal or inequitable, my husband might have a very different view on.
Yeah. And I kind of go back to, our conversation on communication and love languages that we've had in previous episodes. And there might be somebody who's trying their ass off and the other person doesn't perceive that it's there. And so it's invalidating to hear that. But it's also important to recognize that and be like, okay, then what can I do to make it feel more equal or even, if that's what they're looking for? Because I do want to highlight that it's really important to know that even if right now it doesn't feel like reciprocal or even, there's going to be times in relationships where ebb and flows, where one partner is given more effort and the other one's not. It just depends where they're at with stress or work or loss of family and things like that. So you can't expect perfection of it being equal every single time, but we can do things to help, I think, set it up to be successful. And that's where we communicate our expectations and even what's going on for us, right? I'll often in couples see, well, you never do the dishes. You never do the laundry. It's always left to me. And there might be some truth to that, but that's not how we communicate it. And it's more of, I would love for this, or what goes on for you? I need help here. I can't even tell you how many couples I work with where this is probably the first time that they've expressed that this is what they need. And the partner's like, oh, well, of course.
I didn't know that, right? And talking about how many different places effort can be perceived, whether that is in intimacy and with sex. Are we both getting to enjoy the experience? Is it with house chores, childcare, financial burden, lawn care? I mean, there's 1,000 areas. So if you just go to your partner and say, well, it's not equal. In what way? You got to dig deeper.
Yeah.
Right. And are they investing in other ways that you're not counting in your tally? When I talk about tallies, I hear couples talk about almost like a ledger, right?
Oh, God.
The ledger kills me. Are we even? Well, I did the dishes, so now you have to. That tit for tat.
Yeah.
As much as you can, people move away from the ledger, because there are times when I might do a little more. There are times when my partner might do a little more. If by and large it's staying that it's always me doing more, always him doing more, okay, then we need to have a conversation.
Yeah. That's why I love the fair play. We've brought this up in previous episodes, but there's a book on it and there's cards, fair play deck. And I recommend this to couples. It's just something tangible to have. And it actually in the cards and the instructions, it talks about some of the things you do require more energy. So maybe you were doing less, but the things you're doing require more energy than taking out the trash. Like you're doing dishes, but that's like a daily thing. Whereas trash is maybe once a week, depending on how much trash you know.
Even employment. Chris and I talk about this. He works technically more paid hours than I do, but the energy expenditure is likely higher with my work. With
therapy in general. Yeah. It's a lot.
Than his work. Like I couldn't hold 40 to 42 hours like he does and still be functioning.
Yeah.
That would be too much for me and my internal system.
Yeah. And another thing in terms of that is sometimes you get this idea of taking responsibility of holding what needs to be done in your mind. And you're taking that responsibility on your own. And that's an extra load you're taking on that's not shared.
The mental clutter.
Right? Like
keeping tabs on everything, that mental.
And that's part of reciprocity too. How do we reduce the mental clutter in one partner? And for the other partner, when I look at couples, it's like, stop being lazy. Stop being lazy. We get comfortable in relationships. Somebody starts doing something, then you just expect it. Change it up, switch it up, have reciprocity. I can't tell you how many, like this tends to be a root problem for a lot of couples I work with. And it's this getting comfortable and, well, they've always done finances. Great. It's time for you to step in.
That feels very personal. Are you mean that at me, Greg?
No. Oh God, no.
In my marriage, my husband does all our finances, and I freaking hate finances.
Well, you bring up a good point though, is if they agreed upon that's okay.
Sure.
The expectations, right? There's relationships where they are okay with a more patriarchal nature in a heterosexual relationship, right? And those duties around there and domestic chores, and they've agreed upon that. As long as it's agreed upon, that's fine.
Sure.
But if it's not talked about and you're going through, life with this person and
it's assumed.
Yeah. And it's assumed, right?
And what might be taxing to me or take more energy might not for my husband. So like there are certain chores I do, like laundry. I don't mind it. Cathartic. Doesn't bother me. For my husband, it's a really irritating chore. And so for us in our partnership, fine, I'll take the laundry because it takes less out of me than it does for my partner.
Yeah.
Now those finances, I don't like finances. So my husband takes over because it's less energy expended for him.
And what's key about this is it has to be talked about.
Yes.
So sometimes people take on stuff because they see it's frustrating for their partner. Don't enable that. It's like my wife, she's like, I know finances are tough for him. And we talked about this in previous stuff. So she takes it on. I'm like, well, no. Like, I need to be involved in this. I need to take this load and help support this. It's important that the reason why you're taking it on is because your partner will be less stressed and you don't want to deal with that. Because that puts more on your plate. And then what does that do over time? I mean, I've seen resentment build when this isn't resolved.
And balancing it out. Then there are those tasks that neither one of you want to do. So you alternate. For us, that's probably bath time. Some parents love giving their kids baths. We aren't those parents. We are not those parents. So taking turns on that. Or, okay, you take care of them while they're in the tub and I'll catch once they get out of the tub and do that part or whatever. Or with dishes, whoever cooked clean or whoever cooked doesn't clean, the other person does. So having reciprocity in that way.
Yeah. And in the context of like those things like childcare and stuff, those fair play cards, I'm going back to those. I love that because it really gives the couple these tangible things of, oh, I know I'm on maintenance this week. I need to call like, whoever to get the filter replaced in the refrigerator or something, right? Like I'm responsible for that. And then you shuffle and you change it up. But you have this idea of like, I'm going to do this. And that includes even in childcare. There's cards on that of I'm going to do this. And you have a discussion of what does that task look like from the beginning to the end in terms of, okay, are you going to check the diapers and then tell me how we need them? Or are you going to check the diapers, see they're low, and then you're going to go buy them?
Good point.
And really just what are your expectations for the chores for each other?
Here's an important caveat though, that just came to mind. If I'm going to relinquish something to my partner, right? Say I say my plate is too full and I say, okay, I want you to take over childcare or housework, whatever. My partner gets to choose how he gets that done. This is equifinality. So equifinality posits that there are multiple ways to the same ending. What I can't do is say, okay, I want you to do the laundry, but then I'm going to watch you and tell you how to do it.
Micromanage what you can do.
Babel, once you give it to your partner, we give it mind, body, soul.
Yeah.
Right. So long as it gets done in a healthy way, whatever that means for you, you've got to let your partner have a little bit of liberty in how they get there.
It's a great point. And that includes parenting.
Well, except for that one. I'm kidding.
But it includes that.
Yes, it does.
I mean, there's couples where, the partner is like, I want you to take on more. And then they do it. And they're like, no, you're not doing it right. Well, okay, what does that look like and why? But I think there needs to be discussion in general. So the liberty, but for example, okay, it's trash this week. Why is it overflowing onto the floor? Like you can have your liberty, but you know what? I'm not going to be stepping in trash. Thank you very much.
But it's tempting, right? To say, well, I vacuumed this way. Well, I put these toys away this way.
Yeah.
And what that does is creates a new point of tension.
You better have those beautiful triangles in your vacuum. You go straight up, pull out a 45, straight up. Pull.
Is it bad that my husband knows I like it that way? So he does vacuum.
So you had a conversation about it. That's wonderful.
Yes. He does better carpet vacuuming than I do. But talking about that, or maybe my husband took on a chore or a role at one point and now he's sick of it. Can I have a little bit of flexibility to say, okay, I can take that one for a while.
Yeah.
Your turn. And those cards are a great way because it sounds like an objective way of divvying stuff up. It's not about emotion. It's not about anything other than luck of the draw.
Yeah. And again, go back to the idea of the effort for each task. It's not about the size of how many cards you got. It's about what are those tasks in there and how much energy. And then, and it's okay to pass that. Like this week, I'm having such a hard time. Do you mind doing this for me? And can I take something else off, from you, or
Sure.
Or what have you? And what we're talking about too is like, so in the context of reciprocity, there needs to be a conversation about expectations. So what does that look like? We're talking about the trash or the childcare, the vacuuming and things like that, but in a way you're not micromanaging. You want to talk about how you feel and what that means to you, and it takes some time or some energy to self-soothe yourself, because you're not having control over that. Now, if you want control over that, you want to take it all over, then be prepared to have imbalance.
If you've got to micromanage everything, it's yours to own.
Yep.
We can't pass it to our partner, but tell them how to do it. So I think about this as like physical task reciprocity, but there's also like emotional reciprocity. If I am vulnerable with my partner, the hope is they're vulnerable with me. Can we both be vulnerable? Can we both express ourselves? Is there room for both of us to express ourselves? Can I share that I'm sad or stressed, or is there only room for your emotional experience?
Yeah, only for mine. Thank you. Well, it's interesting.
I'll be sure to let your wife know.
What's interesting in my, with my wife is she's very good at letting me do it my own way, but I'm one who loves to collaborate and have feedback. And I'm like, okay, so, how was that for you? Yeah, fine. No, like, what did, is there anything else you want from this? Like, no, it's good. I'm like, oh my God. So, in the thing of doing it my own and give me liberty, like, I also want to have a conversation about it, because I do want to do it the way that she likes, or in something that, and just trying to check in with her emotions is, okay, I let the trash go a little bit. What was that for you? Or, hey, I haven't done laundry in a little bit. Where are you at on that? How are you feeling about that? Because even as much as we don't want to micromanage, we have expectations, and it could cause us some stress. I mean, it's ours to own, but, being a good partner, checking in on that.
And with emotions, even like we just talked about grief, right? So events like that, both of us opening up and talking about this, both of us creating space for the other person to fall apart a little bit.
Yeah.
If it feels like there's only room for you to be sad, or only room for you to be stressed, and not for me, that reciprocity is missing. That creates resentment. That creates distance and disconnection.
But hold in your mind that it's okay, and there'll be periods of time where it's going to be imbalanced. So
long as there is ebb and flow over time, right? Yeah. If it's a constant state, that's a very different conversation.
Yeah, monitor that. And like, what is your expectation? What's long term? Like, I don't want to do this for 6 months, or can it be a couple of years? It depends on what somebody's going through, and having that understanding, but having that conversation of, what does that look like for you? Where are you at? Do you feel like you would have the energy to take on a little bit more around here? I'm burnt out. I need some relief.
I see this with new parents too. So Julianne, in one of our previous podcasts, said that you feed a baby an average of 40 hours a week. And if a mom is nursing for those 40 hours, Dad, you might have to pick up extra house chores. So reciprocity might look different. Absolutely. Mom has now added nursing, perhaps, or breastfeeding, or whatever. So you might have to do a few more cards, a few more things. That doesn't mean it's imbalanced. So some people might say, but I'm doing more of the housework. But how does that balance out over the whole sum of what's happening in the system?
Yeah, absolutely. And having, some, respect for the fact that your partner in that case is nursing and taking on all of this stuff and has to get up in the middle of the night while you're getting to sleep, potentially.
Even in pregnancy, your partner might be tired, real tired. They might be uncomfortable. Even though they're not doing anything, this simple state of being uncomfortable 24/7 is wearing on a body. Yeah. So can you take over other tasks because the mental labor on that birthing person might be so high?
Yeah. And moving out of the romantic relationship and friendships, who's calling more, who's, just reevaluating this stuff. And I think these are areas this is an area specifically to evaluate, to see if you want to put boundaries up, or even continue this friendship, because friendships go, you can go 6 months or several years without talking. And then for some individuals, you just reconnect and you're back to square one right away, or like
pick it back up.
Yeah, exactly. And so it looks different in different relationships and what that reciprocity looks like. But this is where we have to evaluate, what are we wanting? Is it reciprocal? Am I getting the short end of the stick? And maybe for you, that's okay. I mean, granted, hopefully not at the expense of your own sanity and self-worth and things like that. But these are the things to ask yourself and evaluate: am I taking on too much? And how do I ask for reciprocity? And like in a case of a friendship, like, okay, well, they're not willing to, they're not in a place to. So is this something I want to continue and put energy and effort into myself?
We've all had that friend that never asks how you're doing and actually cares. That friend that doesn't call or text you. You have to call or text them every time. The friend who we talk about as draining or taking. Well, that's where it's not reciprocity.
And I do want to go back to the idea earlier that there's certain times where relationships where people agreed upon where they're okay with,
Sure.
maybe an outsider be like, that's not reciprocal, and they're okay. And in some instances, it's naturally that way. Like I think about a parent, a child, right? A parent's not going to expect reciprocity to take care of the kid. If they
hope
do,
not.
I mean, some might.
It does happen, but you hope not. You hope not.
Yeah, so you're not going to expect it there, right? They're doing it, and they're like, no, I want to do these things for you potentially. So in some cases, it is okay for you if that works for you. And I think another important part to ask is if what you're doing is enabling your partner to do nothing or your friend to do nothing. If you take a step back and stop calling as much, like for a friend or something, do they call you?
Good point.
What happens?
Good point. If I take a step back in my household stuff, what happens? Such a good point. I'm just thinking about the Rolodex of my relationships right now.
Yeah.
And which ones are reciprocal and which ones aren't. Even thinking about how they make me feel different, right? So I think of some of my closest friends, and when I think about them, like I feel warm, I feel joy, I feel good and positive. When I think of the ones that aren't reciprocal, that take far more than they give, I can just feel the like, ugh.
Yeah.
Right when they call, it's like, dang, if they do call. Or if I'm going through a hard time, who am I going to lean on?
Yeah.
Do I feel safe to lean on this person?
And you might have individuals in your life that are varying degrees of that.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
The one that I think also comes up as an issue is the one that you continue to chase and they don't want any part of it. You see this in romantic relationships where people want that so bad and they do everything to keep it, but it's only functioning based on that imbalance.
Power dynamic.
Because that person may not want to invest. I see that in even some of my old friendships I've had that I've had to let go. It's like I really wanted to be friends with the person because of what they meant in my life. And I had to ask myself, like, is that meaning in my life? Is that going to go away because they're no longer in my life physically? And in that case, not, right? I still have the memories with them and things like that. But asking yourself, what does it mean to have this friendship or relationship in your life? And is it that important to keep, or can you still, have gained from it, even though you're separating or moving away or putting boundaries on it?
The beauty of age here. My husband and I joke, the older I get, the less I care. So.
Oh, is that what happened?
That's terrible.
I was wondering what happened.
But when I was younger, I really cared about how many friends I had. And
oh God,
I've got to be connected with so many people in this. And I tolerated a heck of a lot more than I do now. And now I'm in a place of, you like me for who I am or you don't. If you don't, okay, no problem. We don't have to be close. And we mutually invest or we don't. And if we don't, okay, we don't have to be friends. And there's beauty that comes in walking in that kind of security in the people who are meant to be close in my space and who are reciprocal will be there.
Yeah.
And allowing myself to set boundaries or let go of those who aren't reciprocal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great point, is that you really were looking for that quality over quantity and reevaluating. And part of that quality is that reciprocity. But in that same sense, let's also have compassion of, where's that person in their life? They just had a new baby, or they just lost a parent, or, they just are in a career change and trying to reestablish their homeostasis or their baseline so they can, because in those friendships that are, pretty sound, they might, not be connected for a couple of years, but then when external distress from that relationship kind of dissipates on one side or the other, then they tend to come back together. Yeah.
I think about even with addictions, right? That pull of, do I feel like this relationship with this person? Yes, I have compassion for them and their addiction or what have you. But over the long haul, if it's continuing over the long haul, if I feel like they're pulling from me over the long haul, if they're stealing from me, if emotionally they're constantly in a take mode, maybe a boundary, because the reciprocity isn't there. It's hard, especially with loved ones, right? Or if we have parents who don't hold the parent role or aren't giving back or whatever it might be. Sometimes we have to establish boundaries around reciprocity with family members that we didn't think we'd have to or didn't want to have to.
Especially like earlier, I was talking about maybe it's more unidirectional or one way when it's parent-child. But then when I think about adult child and parent, you might expect a little more reciprocity in what that looks like in terms of planning or setting dates or something like that. So,
or parents reversing the script, right? And using their child, you talked about this as their support system. If that doesn't feel good for me in this dynamic. How do I talk about that with my parents?
So, and this is where it gets tricky, right? I mean, I don't have like any answer to this, but it's more of a discussion of with our partner, there's a little bit more comfort in maybe talking about this.
Sure.
But what do you say to a friend that's like, you know what, you've been a piece of shit. You know, you've never called, you only answer when you need something, you only call when you need something. Like, how do you say that? Because relationships in general are risky, right? They're risky in general. Like there's a lot of reward for them, but they're also risky, and risky in the sense of some people can take it or leave it, and that's scary. And so how do you talk to a friend if you're fearing that loss?
Ooh, I've done it.
We all have. Yeah.
Sometimes I just gradually let off the gas and see if they call me. And if they don't, it just fizzles out on its own. And then there have been times when I've had to have that hard conversation of, hey, I'm noticing that it feels like there isn't much space for me in this relationship.
Yeah.
Or I'm noticing that when we get together, it's always centered around your stressors. How can I support you? Or, hey, I'm feeling kind of hurt that it seems like I'm always the one that's calling. Do you notice that too?
Yeah. Those are great approaches. And I love when you like back off a little bit and someone's like, you just don't call anymore. I'm like, well, you never called. That's wonderful. Bye.
I've used the phrase, the phone works both ways to my own family a few times. Yep.
And of course it depends on how strong that relationship is, right? I got childhood friends where I can be like, look, you've been pretty shitty. But then there's other ones that are newer. So it really depends on where that is in the relationship and how
sensitive the other person is.
Oh God. Yeah.
So I'm a pretty sensitive human.
Yeah. I haven't been able to tell you, but there hasn't been reciprocity.
I know. It's terrible.
Kim, you've been carrying the team. Your back's hurting right
my
now.
back is so sore.
I appreciate you carrying the team lately. And yeah, I mean, that also goes in with colleagues, reciprocity, right? And I remember, oh God, I think anybody who's gone to school in some capacity and done group work, just think about that time.
Group
and
projects give me like a PTSD response. I hate group projects. You always get that one leech that's going to stick their name on at the end, but do absolutely nothing for that A.
They're trying to get carried.
Yes, I liked A's, so I got a lot of them.
Yeah.
But they never put their effort in. They just put their name in. Oh,
we'll have an episode later on perfectionism, which Kim will talk about.
A spotlight for that one. So bad.
So yeah, I mean, just think about in any relationship, what are you wanting? And is it reciprocal? And that might look different for you, and you might be okay. So use your own definition. A lot of people have this idea it's supposed to be like 50-50, and maybe it's more egalitarian like that. And that's fine. But maybe some people don't expect that, and that just know where you're at. But if you're not there, ask yourself, am I doing this for the right reasons? Like, am I a helper, but I'm forgetting about myself? As long as you're taking care of yourself and you're still able to maintain that in that relationship, then good. But if you sacrificing yourself and doing a lot of these things leads to you not taking care of yourself, then probably not a good.
Or if you know you're the one that's taking. We're speaking a lot to the person who's the one giving. But what about for those that are listening that you're the taker, which is really hard truth to own? We call it in therapy sometimes learned helplessness. This sense of, I can't do anything without this other person's help because I've gotten comfortable in that state. And I've lost my own confidence, my own sense of fortitude or whatever it might be. What then? What if you have a client who's in this side?
So we're going to get very complicated here because now we're going to talk about systems, which is a very complicated topic when we think about how relationships work. I don't think them doing nothing is independent of the person who's doing everything.
What do you mean by that?
So it may be in the case that the majority of what they're doing is just because they don't care and don't want to put effort in the relationship. But there's also that, like you said, learn helplessness, enabling. Yeah. You can't be enabled without somebody else doing something.
True.
It's not independent of what the other person's doing. And it's not about right.
Cycle.
Yeah. And it's not about right or wrong. It's about how do we be more effective? So the person who's maybe doing everything is how can I let off the gas and allow and foster a little bit more independency for them? And it might take a little bit, but it's almost, again, going back to, I think what I said earlier on is people get comfortable. Like, well, they've always done the finances. They've always cooked. I'm not doing that. And you kind of learn a little bit of helplessness of like, well, I've never had to do that. So
trying to step in a little bit. If you're in that role and you know you're in that role today, just do a thought experiment. Notice how much you're giving to your partnership versus how much your partner's giving. Jot it down. Just see.
Without judgment.
Do that thought experiment. Right? For reciprocity to work, it's not just about making sure I get effort back. It's making sure I give effort. It means I sacrifice sometimes. It means that I have to give a little more energy than I feel like giving today.
Yeah.
It means that I have to have the hard moments that I don't want to have. Even I think of parenting. We have 2 girls, and reciprocity in the way I parent both of them. When you have a baby and a preschooler, it's really easy to give more attention to the baby and assume the preschooler is okay. But having to check in, am I really keeping it balanced? Am I giving just as much effort to the less dependent child as the more dependent child?
Yeah.
It's hard. Am I putting her in a place of being parentified? In other words, am I telling my preschooler, you got to also help me parent? And I forget that I'm her parent.
You know what's hard about that is having that awareness in the midst of all the stress.
Oh, it's so hard. Maybe I am aware, but I'll deal with it later. Yeah. It's hard. It is really hard. But to have these healthy relationships that we keep talking about, reciprocity isn't just about the other. It's what am I contributing? Can I have that awareness? If awareness is hard for you, go to a therapist, go to a support group. They're great places to reflect on what I'm giving versus taking.
What I like working with couples is, how do we take all these external things that we want to do to function our lives and look at them as the other, to be a unified front to tackle them together as a team?
Like third chair, right?
We're a team. How are we going to manage this external stuff? Right? Because the focus is our relationship and take care of each other, instead of this tally of who's doing what, I'm doing what, instead of looking at it as a separate of battle between each other, more of how do we work on this together? And again, going back to what we said multiple times in this episode, is there's gonna be times where it's not even.
And that's okay.
It is.
And we'll balance it out. That's the big piece. Is it consistently over time balancing out or not? Are we both happy with the arrangement? Are we both accepting of the arrangement? So, when you're pregnant or after, like I lost my mom or whatever, it wasn't balanced. There are times when my husband is sick. Jeez, how dare he? How dare he get sick? But I might have to pick up those pieces, right? If he can't do what he would normally do because his body is worn out, okay, I have to pick up those pieces. The trust comes in that also when I get sick, he'll pick up the pieces.
Yeah, and it might be imbalanced in certain contexts. Like I'll use my own relationship, for example. Because of my personality, I take a lot more space emotionally. What? Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy. It's so surprising.
But my wife holds more onto the day-to-day stuff in her head.
I could see that.
Right. So she holds onto that, and there's an imbalance. But does that balance each other out? And having a conversation. But even just who you are as a person, you might take more. Right. So I'm an external process. I need to talk about things. My wife, more internal, and she needs time for herself. It's easy for those external processors like myself to take space and have imbalance and not give room for the other person.
True.
And that's what, going back to the idea of systems, like it's her action of maybe not taking space is not independent of me taking everything.
And working through that over time. This is complicated. Reciprocity is something we all say we want, but are we really willing to give the effort to have it? Are we willing to check back in? Just because you checked in a month ago, 2 months ago, a year ago, does not mean it's the same balance it is now.
Yep. It's maintenance, like a car. Check that oil. And the oil in this case would be reciprocity.
Right.
But let's move this conversation, reciprocity, into the bedroom.
Okay.
Intimacy. That is a huge area that comes up where there's not reciprocity.
Absolutely.
In heterosexual relationships, it's often the case where the woman does not feel reciprocated.
Or her pleasure is secondary to male partner.
It's secondary. That is very difficult, very common. You're not alone if this is the case, but this is important to have a conversation about. And I think a lot of times, from my experience, the reason why there's so much imbalance is because it's very hard to talk about these topics. Very hard to ask for this because it's easy to feel like you're failing your partner because it's very vulnerable.
And we don't want to go to friends or family because it's so vulnerable. So we just kind of keep that secret tucked in on ourselves. Unless
you are sharing with friends and family, which your partner might not like, but having, I mean, how do we talk about that without feeling like we're failing or burdening our partner when I'm supposed to be pleasing them? Right.
How do I make sure that we're balanced in terms of foreplay? And I don't just mean in terms of sex foreplay. I mean, dating. I mean, buying my partner flowers. It's not just the man's job to buy flowers here, people. I buy my husband flowers too, or buy him a surprise, or take him on a date, plan a date. Yeah. It's got to go both ways. Yeah. And with the bedroom.
So reciprocity and prioritizing the relationship. Who's planning, who's making dates. Yeah.
so that it feels like I've got effort, I've got intention, I'm thinking about my partner, and they can feel that. I think that's what's really hard is when we're talking about intimacy, it's not just about the orgasm, right? Do we both have an orgasm? An important part, sure, but it's more about my partner didn't consider what I was feeling. My partner didn't take care of my body. My partner was selfish. I hear that all the time, was selfish in that moment.
Yeah.
And so it's the meaning we draw from the whole experience rather than just the outcome of an orgasm.
Yeah. And there's a lot of selfishness in sex. And I mean, we need to advocate for ourselves. If we want reciprocity, we have to go back to what we're wanting. What are we needing? What do we like? And we've come into,
what don't we like?
We've had a lot of conversations where people don't know that. They know what they don't like. So maybe that's a great place to start, is what we don't like, and then figure out what do we like. I love Gottman's card deck, because they have different cards where you just work with your partner and have discussions about different topics, and they have some on sex, and it's varying degrees. So things like salsa, mild, medium, and spicy. And you can start with the, the mild one a little bit, and just what's in there. But there's questions like, is it okay for both of us to leave the bedroom without an orgasm? What do you want me to do? Or what do you want to see my role in your orgasm? Right. And having these conversations, which rarely ever happen.
It kills me. I wish we talked about it more openly.
Yeah.
People think that everyone else is having sex every day, that it's wonderful every single time, that both partners are appreciated in orgasm every time. Here's the tip, people. That's not real.
Yeah.
It's not true. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. And for male heterosexual relationship, it's often the case that women don't have orgasms through intercourse.
Yeah, only about 5% of women can achieve it through just vaginal intercourse. The other 95%, 95 need external stimulation, if anything at all. Some women can't orgasm at all.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons, but the vast majority cannot have an orgasm through just penetrative sex.
Yeah.
And so is there room to talk about that with my partner? Is there room to plan, to have foreplay?
Yeah. And I see what happens in the female partner in this case would be, and I've heard it often, is I'm afraid to say I didn't get what I needed because I feel like they didn't do a good enough job.
Yes.
And ask for yourself. And
we don't want to hurt someone in the process.
Yeah. And I bring this up of, man, it's okay that the woman didn't, your female partner did not orgasm through vaginal intercourse. Now let's talk about what else could we do to help.
Toys.
And in that process, though, now our partners need to provide a roadmap. There's no assuming, no mind reading. We have to lay the roadmap of what we like and don't like. You have to, if you want reciprocity.
I'm trying to depersonalize it. So even I mentioned toys with partners all the time. And sometimes, especially men, not just men, but especially men, feel really threatened. She has to have a vibrator, therefore I'm not doing it good enough.
Exactly.
And that's not the case.
It's not how physiology works.
No. And if you're both having a good time, who gives a shit if a vibrator's in there or not?
Yeah.
Right. So as a team, whether it is with sex or parenting or laundry, the mundane to the exciting, reciprocity, planning trips, planning excursions on trips, consider what your partner is wanting and needing and actually ask for it.
Yeah.
What do you want in this moment? How can we make this special for you? What do you need? If we invite it, hopefully we're having that conversation.
I want to complicate things more. You ready?
Ready.
Working with partners who only care about pleasing the other, that they don't advocate for their own need.
Then you have
both partners.
Oh, both partners.
Both partners.
Well, at least then there's an awareness of a person's needs.
But then they never feel satisfied in helping the other or being able to reciprocate because the other partner is not really guiding them to what they want because they only care what their partner wants. So I've had this multiple times and it gets complicated. And this goes back to, you have to assert your needs. You have to assert your needs.
Just talk about it.
We're going to focus on you today. I get them, some couples practicing today. It's your day. You assert your needs to your partner and guide them. And then you guys set another day for the other partner and have reciprocated and really step and being okay with the fact that you can ask for something and not feel like a burden. You deserve to have reciprocity the way that you want it. You deserve to have balance. You don't deserve to have to carry the whole load.
Truth.
And that's in friendships, that's in families, that's in romantic relationships.
But there's responsibility in that. You have to give voice to what you need.
Yes.
If the other person's not willing to hear your needs, that's when we say it's time for couples therapy, whatever it might be, right? Or that relationship may not be the healthiest. but your partner can't mind read.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't know what your needs are, if you haven't said my needs are, they can't know what they are. And therefore they probably won't get met, especially not to your expectations. Give voice to them.
Yeah. And for couples that say, well, my partner should know. I was like, well, if they had that power, then just go to Vegas, read the cards, know what the dealer's putting out. Like,
right.
Like you can't put that on them to know what you want. You have to advocate for yourself. And I've even had partners like, well, why do I have to do all the work? All the work, like, well, let them know what they need to do so you don't have to do all the work.
Absolutely.
Maybe a little effort up front, but if they have a roadmap, it's going to be much better to you down the road. Like going back to like the vibrator stuff, like it might feel threatening, but you're going to be much happier that your partner's pleased.
And then both of you feel safe to advocate for that. If your partner knows that you're going to feel threatened, they may never say, hey, this could be good for me. Give room for that. I challenge couples on this. Try to mix things up a little bit, whether it is sex or chores. Mix it up. See what happens.
Yeah.
The worst that happens, we go back to how we were.
The worst that happens is someone's micromanaging you how to cook a grilled cheese.
Oh, so bad. Ooh, that sounds good.
That is not burnt evenly on both sides. Can you just leave it up? Okay. You know what? Just move aside. Let me do it.
I have been known to micromanage a grilled cheese because I like it a certain way.
But I think about that is, in going back to this idea of enabling is, if you can't even let them have liberty to do this, they're not going to want to do it. If you want them to take over some tasks, you got to let them take over the tasks. If you just take it over, then they're just going to assume that you're going to do it every time. So what's the point? Reciprocity
is just core to relationships, not just romantic, all of our relationships. It is, to me, a key part of trust. I trust that you are thinking about my needs. I trust that you have my best interest in mind and that you're thinking about me and have intention towards me. It is key in preventing defensiveness or even stonewalling or criticism. Yeah,
absolutely. It's validating. And you feel wanted when there's reciprocity to your expectation, what that looks like for you.
It can be as simple as a text, people. I challenge everyone as you get off of this podcast, text your partner and just say, I'm thinking about you. Mind blowing.
Let's think about our early dating days. They're not texting as much. I only did a couple sentences. Is that enough?
They ended with a period and an exclamation point.
Oh my. So, I mean, the reciprocity gets a little bit more into the microscope of early dating. I
think about MySpace. And was I?
Oh wow!
For young generation anymore.
For young generation, that was a former Facebook before Facebook.
Oh golly! And you had 8 faces, 8 people
who are on your tile, like your favorites.
Yes, your favorites. And then I got moved to number 2. I'm behind so and so. I'm not their best friend anymore. Why am I not in their top 8? What does this mean?
They're
about
in my
me?
top 8. There's no reciprocity.
Oh gosh, there's no reciprocity here.
Oh, we can go down the rabbit hole.
Anyway,
absolutely.
But these reciprocity really helps to prevent from some of these bigger issues that can erode a marriage, erode a friendship, erode a family.
This is a topic I absolutely approach in premarital. And even if people don't want to get married, but just early on in relationships, if they want to go long-term, is we need to talk about what reciprocity looks like for you.
Any relationship therapy that walks in my door, we're talking about this.
Reciprocity, yeah. What does that look like? And that even is reciprocity and being vulnerable. But that might be a little more complicated. And like, how do we make it safe enough for people to feel vulnerable, each person to feel vulnerable? But there's even reciprocity to that. I get that with couples where I express my emotions, but they don't want to share with me. So it's not just these chores or sex, it's also emotions.
I see even therapy, the reciprocity of, well, I'm going to therapy. Why aren't they? Well, I'm doing the work. Why aren't they? Ooh, it is everywhere. Everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just hope there's no reciprocity and criticism, because then it can get pretty heated.
Preach.
Some things we don't want reciprocity in.
So some takeaways. I really challenge everyone. Just make some notes today. What does reciprocity look like in your relationships? Today, throughout the next week, send that text message that says, hey, I'm thinking about you, to a friend, to your partner. You'd be surprised how that little bit of effort, that little bit of reciprocity goes such a long way.
Yeah. And while you're thinking about what does it look like in relationships, what do you want it to look like? And having that conversation potentially of navigating this as a team, not you versus me, but how do we do this together? Like, this is what I want our relationship to look like. What can we do together to get there? And kind of what we talked about, some themes, is the fact that we have responsibility in this. We're not going to get reciprocity if we can't communicate that. And as partners, we have reciprocity in being curious and making sure we're not just standing by helplessly because they've always done it, and checking in with our partners.
It's a give and a take. The give is hard sometimes, but if you're going to get something in return, we've got to give.
Yeah.
At least I hope so.
And of course, I'll say it again, it's okay if right now it's not.
Mm-hmm.
If it has been in the past, it's a good indicator that it'll probably be again in the future, but we all go through things on individual levels and stressors, and that we just don't understand what our partner's going through. We might have to pick up slack a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as Kim has said before, if it's consistently like that, then maybe there's something
greater issue.
But it's okay if it's not like that. And even for like in friendships, it could be several years where it's not. But what are you willing to do? What are your expectations, and what are you willing to put up with?
And can it get back to that healthy place? And if not, that's a harder conversation I've got to have with myself. Is this relationship worth my energy?
Mm-hmm.
Is it still serving my space?
Yeah.
Or is it one maybe I should let go? And then flash to our grieving episode, right? How do I grieve that I thought this relationship could be reciprocal and healthy, and it's not?
Mm-hmm. And is it important for you to keep that relationship for a reason and figure out what those reasons are? So,
well, this has been Relationships Inside Out. Thank you all for joining us. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, topics you'd like us to talk about, please feel free to email us at relationshipsinsideout@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook at Relationships Inside Out. And we look forward to our next round of topics and hope to hear some ideas from you all soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.